I think our subject is so important right now. I'm going to ask Earl to go ahead and come on up. If anybody really wants to read about Earl's bio, they can go into the internet and get into it. Let me introduce Earl Wright right now. He's going to be talking about the current financial crisis and its interplay in the world economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. President Sue, fellow Rotarians, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Before we go through this presentation today, let me just answer a few questions to start off the bat. One, the economy will recover within 2010, so you can bury that question if you want. The stimulus package is positive. It's going to have a positive impact on the economy. 3, between now and June, there's going to be a lot of bad news, awful news, job reports. The talking heads on TV are going to have you weeping. It's going to just be bad news. 4, there's going to be some good news about the stimulus package coming out in mid-year. Start looking for consumer information. That'll be good news for you. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is, are we prepared for the unintended consequences of what's going on at the present time? By the way, if this works, I want to give credit to Lena Boyd, who has done all the technical analysis for me. And if it doesn't work, she'll come up and give the rest of the presentation. Today's economic environment has got some really kind of interesting highlights. As you can see, at the present time, we've got ourselves at around a 7.6% unemployment rate. We've got a federal deficit that's projected for next year of $1.8 trillion. That's the new fiscal deficit we got faced with. And that's 13% of the GDP. For whatever it's worth, we can no longer become a member of the EU. As you know, the European Union, if you have a GDP of deficits greater than 3%, you are questionably a member of the EU. So for the Swiss who like to tell us that we don't know how to manage things, they have even more fodder for their gun now at the present time. Trouble, the TARP, it's a $700 billion package. We've used half of it so far. The international financial markets, credit markets are faltering, have had a horrible period the last 4 months, beginning to improve. Loans, as far as credit markets are concerned, are difficult to access. It's a difficult time right now to get loans. And even though the bankers want to make them, it's difficult to find those people that will qualify in today's environment. We have 11.6 million Americans unemployed. It's a huge number in any society at any point in time. We have lost $40 trillion in capital asset value, $35 trillion in the public markets, $5 trillion in housing alone. That's greater than 3 times the GDP of the United States. I was asked earlier, how do you measure this relative to other post-war periods of time, post-World War II periods of time? And you would have to say that 73, 74, when you took into account inflation and unemployment, and I experienced that period of time, was worse than it is today. But when you take into account the loss of value of capital and net worth, our suspicion is this will be the worst we've had since World War II. The difference is in 73, 74, you had the asset value loss recaptured in about 24 to 36 months. We don't expect that to happen this time. The worldwide stock markets have lost 50% or more. And one that may bother some of you a little bit more than others is the baby boomers. As of January, there was analysis that showed that they lost $5.4 trillion. Now, what does that mean? Let's kind of put that in some perspective. $5.4 trillion for the baby boomers means that they've lost between 10 and 20% of their retirement income. That's what that means. So when you see people talking about working beyond the age of 65, well, you can understand why. You need to figure out how do we recapture that. The other point that's kind of relevant is that if you were to make that up when you're the baby boomer population, they would have to save between 5 and 7%. The savings rate would have to improve to 5 to 7%. We don't save like that in this society. So if we were going to try to make up those lost funds, those monies have got to come out of the consumer side. Well, how did we get here? How in the world did we get ourselves into this mess? Well, the best of intentions. You know, we started with the Community Reinvestment Act. There's nothing wrong with the intentions of that. Redlining is not a good idea. We shouldn't be making loans to people based on where they live. We should be making loans based on people's needs, based upon what their capabilities are. And the Community Reinvestment Act clearly was intended to do that. And there was legislation that lower income households would have more access to funds. It's a good idea to have people own their homes. There's a lot of sense of responsibility to the community, and the communities as a whole are in essence upgraded when the home ownership goes up. And when you have China saving 40% of their income and the Chinese, by the way, do save 40% of their income, and in Asia, that's not unusual to save between 30 and 50% of your income. And when you consider they don't have programs for health care and they don't have programs for Social Security, things like that, that's the way they provide for their future. Well, that money was available, very cheap money that allowed us to do some things in the alternative A and prime loan market, where 20% of our loans in the 2007-2006 period were Alt-A, which in effect means it was information that wasn't complete with regards to loans, or subprime loans, which began the process that we're now in. The beginning of the bust, well, it started in Europe, believe it or not. How did it start in Europe? HSBC decided that some of those mortgages they owned out of the United States weren't quite worth what we thought they were. And they announced a write-off. And other banking institutions said, well, wait a minute, if they're taking a write-off, should we be taking a write-off? Is this correct information that we have on our books? And the beginning of the bust occurred in 2007 with HSBC. And then we have the infamous Lehman bankruptcy. Huge international player. Probably the greatest mistake we made in this time is somehow we didn't figure out how to bail them out. If you could bail out AIG, why couldn't we bail out Lehman? Credit swaps, derivatives, real estate financing, they were the big player in the international markets and a significant part of what happened. But when we think about that and where we came, well, the unfortunate thing was that leverage was not unique to Wall Street and London. Average household has $46,000 of leverage. A person, a household, individual, $46,000. A family of four, $184,000 for a family of four. When you graduate from college, the United States at present time, $20,000 or more of debt for college graduates. In 2007, when we bought a car, we financed it for 101% of what the car's value was. I would say that we knew how to use leverage in the United States. In 1957, when you take a look at what we have in the way of financial debt, our debt since 1957 has grown 25 times faster than the economy has grown. Business debt has soared, so business doesn't have clean hands either. Their debt ratio of debt to equity doubled from 44% to 90%. And we now have debt of approximately $10.1 trillion as corporate debt, 20% which is owned overseas, and 46% of that debt is junk rated. Ended up with the banks. They're undercapitalized. We have banks that have losses on their books, according to Alan Greenspan in a speech he made on February 16th, 2009, of $40 to $50 billion of additional losses that need to be taken. We have $250 billion of additional bank capital is needed, according to Dr. Greenspan. And recent information has said that we have about $400 billion of commercial real estate that needs to be refinanced in the next 24 to 36 months. And guess where most of that is? It's our local banks. In the last 7 years, those of you that have been involved in real estate, 70% of all the commercial real estate financing has been done by your community banks right here